You got to embrace a certain uncertainty of things and just realize that sometimes there are no answers. It is what it is, and you need to make the best decision possible for that lifter, and that lifter needs to do the same thing for themselves at that given time. And what may be right at this time is probably not going to be right the next time. So you need to be aware of that, and the evolving relationship between the coach and the lifter, the revolving relationship between the lifter and the skill of the lift, and their changing total. And we talked about the constraint of the performer. Well, if you have a novice that starts putting on muscle mass, it's going to change the way that they do the lifts. If a lifter loses weight, if they gain a lot of weight, like all of those things matter. And like you're giving an input with an expected output, and you need to update your hypothesis based off of the data that you receive back. And I think, I went from the data set of those volumes and intensities and all of that stuff to basically a data set that's my intuition based off of my strong relationships with my lifters. And like you said, it's not like we just come in here, we huff ammonia, blast music, and just like crush weights. We make good training decisions. And I think if people came and actually saw how our training sessions happened, they'd be pretty impressed by the amount of communication between all of the lifters, the support, the decision making. Like a lot of it is actually it's pretty cool to see, and it's a different training environment than I've ever been in my lifetime.
Well, I think one of the things that makes the whole process difficult for people to understand is we've, for the longest time, tried to correlate and link things like fatigue and things like a dip in performance and in mood to injury. And it's created this large ball of fear for a lot of people where they don't want to go into those realms. The problem is we don't even know if that is the case. We're terrible at predicting injury. We're terrible at figuring out when it's going to happen. Most low back pain and that sort of thing is nondescript. We don't have a lot of reasons behind a lot of this stuff. And people shy away from the uncertainty because they think they have data that correlates, and we just don't know enough about a lot of this stuff to say that definitively. No, and we say that on the show all the time. I mean, it's one of the things, it's a common theme with what we talk about, is we suck at telling you when you're going to get hurt or if you're going to get hurt. And linking it to some of these things is probably chasing ghosts.
And I think in a lot of cases, that's what leads to those things. Like if you look at like barbell sports in general, just have a low risk of injury compared to other sports. But most other people aren't running out onto the field worried about getting injured. They're just worried about performing the task at hand. And I actually think this is like one of the cool things of the barbell sports is it's so mental. Like you're performing a lift for a very short amount of time, but you get a lot of time to think about it. And I think we put these situations on our lifters, and I think if coaches would embrace that uncertainty a little bit more, they'd realize that they have the freedom to do so many more things. Like, if you're so certain that volume is the main driver in performance, and if performance for this lifter is not down and you just go to increase volume, you are literally confining yourself to this small box. And eventually, sooner than later, because of how small this box is, you're going to run into a wall. And you're not going to know where to go because you don't know how to move that box around in a manner that's going to allow you to keep that progress rolling forward for that lifter. And if you take those general principles that are out there and you just believe them to be 100% true all of the time, and what you've read in elite FTS blogs and these passed down expectations and beliefs, you're going to be confided into this tiny box. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to have success for a period of time with your lifters, and then you're going to run into a wall, and you're going to keep running into that same wall until you realize that those principles, yeah, they're true, but once you narrow it down for the individual, it becomes an entirely different game. And what we believe to be true now, and Kylie points this out in his research, like those principles, they are old. And that's the stress research has come a long way since then. And the Journal of Strength and Conditioning, I'm still reading EMG studies off of what muscles are being used most in high bar or low bar squats or safety squat bar squats, or like at the end of the day, like I'm at the point where I don't even know if that stuff matters. Like I don't think it's individual muscle groups that are weak and that's what's leading to these technical breakdowns. Like I think a lot of the information that we have is just, our research is just so poor, and there's nowhere to look except for older powerlifters, old blogs, and I think it's just it handcuffs the coaches and creates this hard to break cultural belief with the lifters getting involved in the sport.
It's an understanding of just the dynamics. So your example, I'm going to increase volume and that's going to drive adaptation. That may work, but if it works, you just say, cool, we're going to roll with this for a while. If and when it stops working, I think that's where people get into trouble, because they're thinking this increase in volume from a quote unquote scientific standpoint, I'm progressively overloading this metric. We should continue to see progress. I'm going to continue to overload. When that overload or when that progress stops, what the hell? The science didn't work. You know, what am I missing? What meta-analysis didn't I read? When you could just say, you know what? The organism is not responding to that stressor anymore. What else can I tweak? That makes some sense. You know, like, I'm not going to have you go run marathons now as a change of stressor, but we're going to change up. We got variation, we've got tempo, we've got position, all of these variables, constraints that we can manipulate to give you a slightly different stressor, but still further adaptation pretty much within the same construct of the sport itself. We get too locked in, I think, on the reasons of why, and we're just not quite there. Why is just,
I don't know.
Yeah. The last thing that I wanted to ask you at least was about injury specifically, because you've got are in a unique situation where you've got, you know, I don't know how often Mike and Steph and Zach are like training with you in house, but it's like, what happened? Not them specifically, but what if a lifter is to the point where they've been complaining of pain consistently that's affecting their performance and doesn't seem to be, it seems to be such that I'm going to have to intervene from a programming standpoint to fix this, or maybe this is actually further enough on the realm of Mike and Zach and Steph where I kind of want to like push it off to them. Is there some type of like heuristic that you're subscribing to there, or like how do you manage the injuries now that you're coming at it with this approach?
So typically, like, you know, how I would view an injury, so how I define it as a coach, if the pain is altering mechanics and creating a significant decrease in performance, whatever that may be, you know, just kind of might be a gut feeling. I don't have any like hard set guidelines on that. If I can't just alter a position and regain both of those things, regain the mechanics and regain the performance, I'm immediately sending them to Mike, Zach, and Steph. If there's a lot of times too where, you know, my lifters still have the appeal to authority, and don't get me wrong, they believe in me, but when it comes to when they're feeling pain, like I'm their performance coach, where they just might need to have a conversation with Mike. And I might identify that early on before it's even a problem in training. And they're just like, hey, this is bothering me. And I realize in the conversation, they're just kind of not buying what I'm selling, and that they might appeal to a higher level authority when it comes to this stuff. I'll have them talk to Mike. And I think it's good too that like Mike, Zach, and Steph, they do train here in person pretty frequently. So they have run-ins with everybody. And, you know, Zach's always complaining about something hurting. So the fact that that he's training and something's hurting, and he's a physical therapist that I respect, you know, for the other lifters to see that, I do think that there's a positive tie-in with all of that stuff.
I like that dynamic. Do you find sometimes where you know you're going to send somebody to Mike or Zach or Steph, and you pretty much know exactly what they're going to say to them, But it's like what you said, if I try to get my mom to back squat her, she's not going to listen to me, but I'll send her to one of you guys and, she'll love it. It's like trying to coach your family. Do you when they come back, you said, oh yeah, Mike just said this, and this, and you're like, oh, great, awesome, great idea. Mike's so smart. In the back of your head, you're like, that's exactly what I fucking told you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I'm at the point now where I think I can easily identify when that's just what they need, and I don't even have that conversation with them. I'm like, hey, I think you're fine. Here's why I think you're fine. But it might be good to go talk to Mike, and Mike will talk him off the ledge a little bit.